Utilitarianism is often thought to belong to the consequentialist class of moral theories. Any consequentialist moral theory will be one that states that the consequence of one's conduct are the ultimate basis for any judgment about the rightness or wrongness of said conduct. For some, utilitarianism would fall under this category, since what matters for the sake of producing happiness are the actual consequences of an action, be they perceived or physical. One critique of consequentialist moral theories, and by extension of utilitarianism, is that they attribute wrongdoings where there seem to be none. Take the case of a person that buys a vacation for a friend as a gift, and when the friend takes the plane to go on vacation, it crashes, and he dies. The critique goes that if what a moral theory cares about are consequences, the loss of utility of -100 due to the death of a friend should be blamed on the person who bought the vacation as a gift, since the consequence of that gift was the death of a friend. To nullify this counterexample, we have to distinguish between expected consequences and actual consequences. Actual consequences are what happens after an action is made. In our example, the actual consequence of having bought the gift is the death of a friend, while the expected consequences are an expected value of the possible cases that may occur after an action is made. In our case, they are mostly comprised of a happy vacation. Let's model the example utilizing expected utility and see where that leads us. The individual buys a vacation for a friend. The chance that the plane crashes and he dies is 0.000005. So the utility associated with that scenario is -100 times 0.000005. Instead, assuming that the happiness given by enjoying the vacation is 0.03 utility, in the case the plane doesn't crash, we would have 0.9999995 times 0.03 positive utility. So taking the expected utility results in approximately 0.03 positive utility. We have rendered this counterexample moot, and to do so, we only needed to specify that in the utilitarian framework we care about expected consequences, not actual ones. This is reasonable, because we know humans do not possess the ability to divine the future. Another critique of utilitarianism, due to its consequentialist nature, can be subsumed by the following counterexample. Suppose person A were to kill person B on purpose while speeding with his car. Suppose also that person C were to kill person D, speeding with his car, but this time by accident. Then the critique goes, in both of these cases the actions of person A and person C lead to the same loss of utility. So the utilitarian framework would consider both person A and C to have committed a morally equivalent action. This would seem like a failure of a utilitarian theory. But breaking down the example and looking at its nuances, one notices that the utility principle would lead to a different answer. First, modeling the example more accurately, the expected loss of utility due to running over a person with a car while speeding is quite close to -100, since there is a high chance of death for the victim, while the expected utility loss for driving negligently is much lower. People drive negligently all the time, but only very rarely does it result in a death. So assuming that the chance of causing a death through the negligent driving performed by person C is 10%, the action of person C would yield -10 utility. Secondly, person A has broken a different societal rule and has done so on purpose. We know that eroding a societal rule that brings happiness is a negative utility action. So let's say person C yields, in addition to the -10 utility from the careless driving, -200 utility for the erosion of a societal rule of not killing a person from negligent behavior. Person A would also yield another amount of negative utility for the erosion of the rule of not killing a person voluntarily. We are now left to determine if the loss of utility from the erosion of the rule of not murdering a person is greater than the loss of utility from the erosion of the rule of killing a person through negligent behavior. It seems apparent that the rule that would lead to a greater loss of utility if eroded entirely would be that of not murdering. Say we decriminalized accidentally killing a person through negligence. We would then have great negative effects to the happiness of all human beings, due to the fact that some people might be more nonchalant with regulations in the workplace or while driving their car. But decriminalizing the rule of not murdering a person would quite easily produce more negative utility, since it would be legal to just kill people if one wanted to. Thus, the utilitarian framework would not judge both person A and person C as having committed an action with the same amount of negative utility. Person A would be judged more harshly. Additionally, it seems plausible that a person that purposefully commits a violent crime would be more likely to repeat it. So there may be an ulterior significant source of negative utility for person A, Notice that, from a foundational standpoint on law, the explanation to the example of the drivers endorses the juridical branch in its pursuit of the motives of the defendants at the time of their transgressions. More rigorously, determining the motives is a positive utility action, since, as the last example showcased, the amount of utility lost is dependent on the motives of the perpetrators, and to punish them accordingly, their motives must be known. So the utilitarian philosophy is perfectly compatible with the judicial branch under this regard.